When I drove up to my mountain cabin, I expected peace and quiet. Instead, I found my sister's SUV in my driveway, her kids' toys scattered all over my porch, and smoke rising from my chimney. My heart dropped. For a second, I thought maybe someone had broken in, but then I saw Dana's favorite scarf hanging over the porch rail. I parked beside her car and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. This cabin had always been my place, the one bit of peace I had left after years of long shifts at the hospital. It was the only thing I had inherited from our grandmother, and I'd spent every spare dollar fixing it up. Seeing it full of someone else's stuff made my stomach twist. When I walked up the steps, the front door was wide open. Inside, the smell of pancakes and coffee hit me. Dana's husband, Rick, was standing at the stove like he owned the place, wearing an apron that wasn't his. Dana's kids were running through the living room, dragging one of my grandmother's quilts across the floor. "Lydia, you're early," Dana said, smiling like nothing was wrong. She had her hair tied up and looked completely at home. "Early?" I asked. "What are you doing here?" She laughed. "Relax. We just needed a little getaway. You weren't using it, so we thought, why not? Grandma would want family to enjoy this place." Her tone made it sound like I was the unreasonable one. I looked around. My grandmother's rocking chair was covered in cereal, my rug stained, and boxes of their stuff lined the hallway. "How long have you been here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Rick shrugged. "Couple of weeks. The kids love it here. Great air, good space. You should have told us sooner how nice this place was." "A couple of weeks." My throat went dry. They hadn't just stopped by. They had moved in. I told Dana she should have asked. "You don't just take over someone's house." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. You're so dramatic. You act like we're strangers." The words hit hard. Dana had always been like this, taking what she wanted, twisting things so she looked innocent. I felt the old anger rise, the same kind that used to burn when we were kids and she'd steal my clothes or tell Mom my secrets. I wanted to yell, to tell them to pack their things and leave, but standing there, I felt outnumbered. Her kids were giggling, Rick was humming, and Dana was acting like she belonged there more than I did. I stepped outside, breathing in the cold mountain air. The cabin looked the same from the outside, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I didn't know what to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them stay here forever. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the mess around me. Crayon marks covered the wall near the fireplace, big colorful circles, and stick figures. My grandmother's old bookshelf had been moved, and the legs were scratched. I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't a visit. They had taken over. "Dana, what is all this?" I asked, trying not to yell. "You can't just move in here without asking me." She didn't even look up from her coffee. "It's family property, Lydia. Grandma would have wanted us all to use it." My hands clenched at my sides. "No, she left it to me. You know that. The will was clear." Dana sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You barely come here. It was just sitting empty. We're family. It's not like we're strangers." Rick, sitting on the couch with his feet on my coffee table, added, "I fixed your door hinges and cleaned the gutters." "You're welcome." I glanced toward the back door. He had replaced the brass handle with a cheap metal one that didn't match anything. "You didn't have to fix anything. Nothing was broken." He smirked. Looked loose to me. The casual tone in his voice made my skin crawl. I walked through the cabin, trying to breathe, but everywhere I looked, something was wrong. They'd rearranged furniture, put their clothes in my grandmother's old dresser, hung their jackets on hooks I had made by hand. Even the air smelled different, like cheap air freshener instead of the pine scent I loved. I turned back to Dana. "You need to pack up. Today. I'm serious." She looked at me with that same patronizing smile she used when we were younger. "Oh, come on, Lydia. Don't be dramatic. The kids are happy here. You can't really throw your own family out." I felt my face grow hot. This isn't about family. It's about respect. Dana stood, arms crossed. "Respect? After all I've done for you? I helped you after your surgery. I watched your dog when you worked those long shifts. And now you're threatening to call the police on me." Her words hit hard because part of me still wanted to believe she cared. But looking at her now, all I saw was manipulation. She knew exactly how to make me feel guilty, how to twist things so she came out the victim. I took a deep breath and said quietly, "If you don't leave, I'll have to call the sheriff." Her expression changed, not scared, just disappointed, like I was the one ruining things. "You really are ungrateful, Lydia." For a long moment, I stood there in silence, feeling small in my own home. The sound of the kids laughing from the porch made it worse. I wanted to scream, to throw them all out, but my throat tightened. Instead, I turned away and said, "I'll come back tomorrow. I expect you gone." Dana's voice followed me as I walked out the door, soft and sharp all at once. "You'll regret this." But deep down, I already did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the small bed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the wind outside. The cabin used to make me feel calm, but now every creak felt like a reminder that I wasn't welcome anymore. I could hear Dana and Rick laughing in the next room, like they owned the place. As I listened to their voices, my mind drifted back to when we were kids. Dana had always been the favorite. Mom would praise her for every little thing, even when I was the one who actually did the work. Once, I spent hours baking a cake for our grandmother's birthday. When she saw it, Dana jumped in and said she made it, and Mom believed her. I remember standing there, holding the dirty mixing bowl, too shocked to say anything. That was how it always went. Dana borrowed my clothes, my books, even my friends. She would promise to return things, but never did. If I complained, she'd cry and say I was being mean. And Mom would tell me to let it go because Dana was younger and didn't know better. But she did. She always knew how to twist things to her advantage. Now, decades later, I was living through the same pattern. Only this time, it wasn't a dress or a book she'd taken. It was my grandmother's cabin. I turned on my side, facing the wall, trying to block out their voices. But then I heard something that made my stomach tighten. Rick's voice was low but clear. "If we stay long enough, she'll give up on this place. It's too much work for her anyway." Dana laughed softly. "Exactly. She never uses it. Once she realizes we're better suited for it, maybe she'll just sign it over. We could fix it up, maybe even sell it later." I stopped breathing. My chest felt tight, and my hands curled into fists under the blanket. They were planning to take it, not just stay for a while, but keep it forever. I remembered the promise Grandma made before she passed, her frail hand squeezing mine. "Keep this place safe, Lydia. It's for you." I had nodded, tears in my eyes. That cabin was the one piece of her I had left. And now Dana wanted to erase that too. I stared into the darkness, the sound of their laughter echoing through the thin walls. Every old memory, every lie, every stolen thing, mixed with the sting of what I had just heard. I realized something important in that moment. My sister wasn't going to stop taking from me. Not unless I made her. The thought settled in slowly, like ice spreading through my veins. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This time, she wasn't getting away with it. The next morning, I woke up early and went to the living room, hoping to find some quiet before everyone else got up. But the moment I walked in, my heart stopped. Several boxes that had been stored neatly by the fireplace were gone. Those boxes held my grandmother's old journals, photo albums, and the few heirlooms she had left me. Lace tablecloths, letters, and a small wooden box with her initials carved on top. I stepped outside and saw a pile of trash bags near the driveway. My breath caught when I noticed the corner of one of Grandma's old quilts sticking out of a torn bag. I rushed over and ripped it open. Inside were the journals, wet from coffee grounds, and the wooden box cracked in half. My knees went weak. I picked up one of the ruined photographs. It was Grandma holding me on the porch the summer before she died. The ink was smeared, the paper soft from moisture. "Rick!" I shouted, my voice shaking. He came out of the cabin, holding a mug of coffee like nothing was wrong. "What the hell is all this?" I demanded. He frowned. "Oh, that stuff? It was just old junk. The kids needed room in the closet, so I tossed it. Don't worry. I saved the blankets that weren't falling apart." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "Those weren't junk. Those were my grandmother's things. They were mine." He shrugged. "Didn't look like you cared much. They were just sitting there collecting dust." Something inside me snapped. I pushed past him and stormed into the cabin. Dana was sitting at the table eating breakfast with the kids. She looked up, annoyed. "What's with the yelling? You're scaring the kids." I slammed the ruined photograph down in front of her. He threw away Grandma's things. Her journals, her photos, all of it. Dana glanced at Rick, then back at me. "Lydia, calm down. They were old. You can't keep everything forever." I felt heat rising in my face. "This is my house. You don't get to decide what stays or goes." Her tone turned sharp. "You're overreacting, like always. Maybe you're too emotional to handle this place on your own." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words cut deeper than she knew. She had said things like that my whole life, that I was too sensitive, too serious, too much. But this time, I didn't let her see me break. "Pack your things," I said quietly. "You're leaving today." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're ridiculous. We'll leave when we're ready." I didn't trust myself to answer. My eyes burned as I walked past them, out the door, and into the car. As I drove down the mountain road, the tears finally came. My chest hurt, but beneath the sadness, something else started to grow, something cold and steady. I didn't know how, but I was done letting them walk all over me. They had taken everything once again, and this time, I was going to make sure they paid for it. I called Malcolm from the car, hands still shaking. He's been my friend since college, and he knows real estate law. I told him everything, trying to calm my voice. He asked for the title number and a few dates, then said the words I needed to hear. The cabin's deed was in my name alone. He paused, then added that someone had tried to file a claim against it with documents that didn't look right. "Bring me copies," he said. "Don't do anything rash." Hearing that made something click. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I started to plan. Anger felt useful when it had a direction. Over the next 2 days, I made lists. I wrote down dates I'd been at the cabin, every time Dana or Rick had been there, and where I had found things moved or missing. I took pictures on my phone of the crayon marks, the new handle on the back door, the pile of boxes that wasn't there before. I labeled each photo with the date and a short note on my phone so I wouldn't forget. I backed everything up to the cloud and emailed copies to Malcolm and another friend, Jenna, who agreed to keep them safe. When Malcolm read the copies of the claim, he told me the signatures looked forged. He said we could fight it, but the best evidence would be proof of their intent and the timeline. That meant I needed more than words. It meant catching them saying things or making moves that showed they meant to take the place. So I bought 2 small cameras and a few recorders. I didn't want anything fancy, just things that worked. The next visit, I brought them in a shopping bag and acted like I was making a peace offering. I knocked on the door with a smile and a coffee thermos in hand. Dana opened it and hugged me like I'd missed her, and for a few minutes I let the act be real. I laughed with the kids, told stupid stories, and pretended to forget the hurt. I listened when Dana complained about work, and I nodded when she said how much the kids liked the creek. While I poured coffee, I slipped a camera onto the shelf that faced the living room and tucked a recorder in a plant pot. I put another camera in the hallway where they sometimes met privately. My hands moved careful and quick, like someone who has done this before but never told anyone. If they noticed, they didn't say anything. I also started keeping a paper journal. I wrote times of conversations, exact phrases they used, and how they looked when they lied. When Dana guilt-tripped me about everything she had done for me, I wrote their words down, exactly as she said them. I kept receipts for the little things I bought for the cabin after they moved in, because proving I invested time and money would matter. On the surface, I softened. I told Dana we could talk about sharing chores and let her tell me little plans. I smiled and agreed to fix the porch step with her help. Inside, I waited for them to show me who they really were. I did not trust their smiles anymore. I had evidence and patience now, and I knew how to use both. A few days later, I sat alone in my apartment, laptop open, headphones on. My hands trembled as I clicked through the recordings from the cabin. The first few clips were just normal sounds, doors opening, the kids laughing, Dana talking about groceries. But then one file caught my attention. It was from the small camera I'd hidden near the living room shelf. Rick's voice came through clear. He was on the phone, pacing across the room. "Yeah, it's all handled," he said. "The deed issue won't be a problem. I got someone to look over the papers. Once we're settled, Lydia won't even bother fighting it." My stomach tightened. His tone was confident, almost proud, like he'd pulled off something clever. He paused, then laughed. "She's too soft. Always has been." I took off the headphones and stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. My heart hurt, but I wasn't surprised. I clicked the next recording. This one came from the hallway camera. Dana's voice filled the room. She was on the phone too, her tone light and careless. "Once Lydia finally lets go, we can sell the place," she said. "Rick knows a guy who'd buy it fast. We could make enough to pay off the truck and maybe take the kids to Florida. She won't fight it. She hates conflict." I froze. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. Then anger hit me like a wave. All the guilt, all the confusion I'd felt before gone. They weren't just taking advantage of me. They were planning to steal the cabin completely, sell it, and use the money for themselves. I played the clips again, this time writing down timestamps and quotes. Every word felt heavier than the last. When I finished, I emailed the files to Malcolm with a short note. I think this is enough. He called back almost right away. Lydia, he said carefully, this is serious evidence. Don't confront them yet. Let me handle the next step. We'll get a court order before they even know what's happening. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. My heartbeat slowed, and I sat back in my chair. The fury was still there, but it was controlled now, sharp and focused. That weekend, I drove back up to the cabin. Dana was outside hanging laundry, and Rick was fixing something under the porch. They smiled when they saw me, as if everything was fine. I smiled back. Hey, I said lightly waving. Thought I'd spend a few days here again. Dana nodded. Good. Maybe we can finally settle things like adults. I just smiled again. Sure, I said softly. Let's do that. Inside, I made coffee and sat by the window, pretending to relax. But in my pocket, my phone buzzed with a message from Malcolm. Everything's in motion. Sit tight. I looked out at the trees swaying in the mountain wind. They thought I was weak, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I called Dana a few days later and told her I wanted to have a family dinner at the cabin. My voice was calm, almost cheerful. She seemed surprised but pleased. Finally, she said, you're acting normal again. I told her I'd bring dinner and that we could talk everything out. She agreed right away, thinking she'd won. That evening, the sun was setting behind the trees when they arrived. Rick carried a case of beer, and Dana brought a salad, acting like nothing bad had ever happened. I smiled and set the table. The smell of roasted chicken filled the cabin. For a moment, it almost felt like old times, but inside, my chest was tight. We sat down together. Dana started talking about her kids' school and her new job. Rick cracked a few jokes, trying to make the room light. I played along, laughing in the right places, nodding when they spoke. It was almost peaceful, until I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. I want you both to listen to something, I said quietly. They looked confused. Rick frowned. What's this about? I pressed play. His own voice filled the room. Yeah, it's all handled. The deed issue won't be a problem. Rick froze. Dana's fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate. I didn't stop the recording. Then came her voice, clear as day. Once Lydia finally lets go, we can sell the place. She won't fight it. Silence fell. The only sound was the soft hum of the fridge. Dana's face turned pale, and Rick's eyes darted toward her, then back at me. The smug confidence they always carried was gone. I looked at them both. You really thought I wouldn't find out? Dana stammered. Lydia, it's not what you think. We were just talking. We weren't actually going to. I cut her off. Stop. You said exactly what you meant. Rick tried to speak, but I raised my hand. I've already sent everything to my lawyer and the sheriff's office. The forged papers, the recordings, all of it. Rick's jaw tightened. You didn't have to go that far. Didn't I? I asked. You tried to steal my grandmother's home. You threw away her things. You lied to my face. Dana started crying, her voice shaking. Please, Lydia. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. We just needed a place to stay. We made a mistake. Her tears didn't move me anymore. I had seen them too many times before, each one followed by another betrayal. I stayed seated, calm and steady. I believed you for most of my life, I said. And every time you took something from me. But this time you went too far. Dana reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I don't hate you, I said softly. I just don't trust you anymore. For the first time, she didn't have a reply. Rick looked away, his face red with anger and shame. The meal sat untouched between us. I stood up, picked up my phone, and said quietly, dinner's over. Then I walked outside into the cool mountain air, leaving them sitting in their silence. The next morning, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee waiting. The air was still, the kind of quiet that comes before something big. Around 10, 2 sheriff's cars pulled up the dirt road. Dana stepped out of the cabin, squinting in the sunlight, confused at first. Rick followed her, his face tightening when he saw the officers. One of the deputies greeted me politely and then walked over to Rick. Richard Evans, he asked. We need to ask you a few questions about some property documents filed in your name. Rick tried to stay calm. This is a mistake, he said quickly. It's a family matter. The deputy held up a folder. We've seen the paperwork. The signatures don't match the legal owners. That makes it a crime. Dana's face went pale. Wait, she said. I didn't know anything about that. Rick handled the papers. I just thought. The second officer interrupted. Ma'am, we also have an audio recording of you discussing selling the property once your sister. Let's go. Dana's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at me, eyes wide and wet. Lydia, please. I didn't mean it like that. I stood quietly, holding my mug, watching the scene unfold. The officer spoke with Rick for several minutes, asking questions, taking notes. He kept insisting it was a misunderstanding, that it was just paperwork confusion. No one believed him. When the sheriff finally turned to me, he said, Ms. Carson, everything checks out. The property is yours. They'll have to leave today. I nodded, not saying much. Dana started crying again, grabbing her things from the porch. Rick muttered under his breath as he threw bags into the back of their car. The kids stood near the steps, silent and scared, while Dana kept apologizing between sobs. Before getting into the car, she turned to me one last time. Her voice was sharp and trembling. You're heartless, Lydia. We're family. You didn't have to humiliate us. I met her eyes. My voice came out low and steady. You taught me how to stop being a doormat. For a moment, she just stared, unsure what to say. Then she slammed the car door, and they drove off down the mountain road. I stood there until the sound of the engine faded. The wind rustled the trees, and the cabin was quiet again. For the first time in weeks, it finally felt like mine. Months passed after Dana and Rick left the mountain. The cabin sat quiet through the winter, untouched, waiting. When spring came, I drove up there alone with a car full of cleaning supplies, paint cans, and a small toolbox. The dirt road was still bumpy, the trees taller, and the air smelled sharp and fresh. When I unlocked the door, dust floated in the sunlight. The place looked tired. The walls were still marked with crayon drawings, the wood floors scuffed, and the air felt heavy. But it was mine again. I rolled up my sleeves, opened all the windows, and got to work. I started in the living room. It took hours to scrub the stains off the walls. Some of the marks wouldn't come off completely, so I sanded the wood and painted over it. With each brush stroke, the anger I'd carried began to fade a little. I fixed the broken door handle Rick had installed, replacing it with one that matched the old style. I cleaned the windows until the glass shone. At night, I sat by the fire with a blanket around my shoulders. It was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely. I could almost imagine Grandma sitting in her favorite chair beside me, humming softly the way she used to. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like crying. I just felt still. A few days later, I decided to clean the old storage room. Most of what they had thrown around was broken, but in the corner under a pile of torn boxes, I found something that made me stop. It was one of Grandma's old journals, the cover bent and stained but still readable. I wiped off the dust and opened it carefully. Her handwriting was shaky but clear. The first few pages were about the cabin, how she'd built it with Grandpa, how proud she was of it. Then further down, a line caught my eye. She had written, "Sometimes the ones who share your blood are the quickest to take what isn't theirs. Protect what you love, even if it means standing alone." I sat there for a long time, holding that page. It felt like she was speaking directly to me across time, warning me about exactly what had happened. I smiled through the ache in my chest. She had known. She had gone through her own kind of betrayal, and maybe that's why she left the cabin to me, because she trusted I'd understand one day. When I stepped outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains. The air was cool and quiet. The porch boards creaked under my feet, and the smell of pine filled the air again. I looked at the cabin, the clean windows, the new paint, the soft glow from inside, and felt peace settle over me. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a promise kept, one I finally understood. The last of the spring snow had melted, and the mountain looked alive again. The trees were green, the air was soft, and the sound of the river below drifted through the open windows. I sat on the porch steps with a cup of tea, watching the sunlight move slowly across the valley. Everything felt different now, quieter but stronger. For months, I had worked on the cabin until it felt whole again. But the real work had happened inside me. I had learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. I had stopped waiting for Dana to apologize, stopped replaying her words in my mind. Some days I still thought about her, but the hurt wasn't sharp anymore. It was just a dull memory that no longer had power over me. I often thought about what betrayal really meant. It's strange. You never expect it from the people closest to you. Strangers can't really break your heart, only family can. When Dana took the cabin from me, it wasn't just the house she tried to steal. She took my trust, my sense of safety. But when I fought to get it back, I found something I didn't know I had: strength. I remembered all the times in my life I had let her talk over me, guilt me, or make me feel small. I used to think keeping the peace was the same as being kind. Now I understood that peace built on silence isn't real. Sometimes protecting yourself is the only kind thing you can do. The cabin had once been a place we both loved, a symbol of family. Now it was something else, a reminder that love can survive even after trust breaks, but it changes shape. It becomes something quieter, something that belongs only to you. Inside, the walls smelled faintly of new paint and pine. The shelves were lined with my grandmother's books, and her old quilt was folded neatly on the couch. It felt like the home it was always meant to be, steady, simple, and safe. I stood up and looked out at the mountain ridge one last time before going inside. The sun was sinking low, turning the sky gold and orange. I thought about everything that had happened: the anger, the sadness, the long nights wondering why family could hurt each other that way. And then I realized it didn't matter anymore. I couldn't change the past, but I could choose what came next. As the last bit of sunlight touched the porch, I stepped back into the cabin and closed the door. The sound was soft, final, and peaceful. I wasn't closing it to keep people out. I was closing it because for the first time in my life, I finally felt at home with myself.